Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Chof, Ches, Oder Rishon, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Vayakhel. It's also Shabbos Shkolim, and it's Shabbos Mevorachim Oder Beis. And we're going to speak a thought of the week. But first, as usual, in the past couple of months, we've given tzedakah. G'del tzedakah shemakarev sagula. Israel, we should win the war, and all hostages should return home safely now. Then we're going to say a prayer, and this prayer is going to be connected to the thought for the week. And this we say every single day in Shemoneh Esrei 3 times a day. Barcheinu Avinu kulanu ke'echad. Barcheinu Avinu, Father, bless us, kulanu ke'echad, as all are one. Bless us all together. That's the simple meaning. And the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 32 of Tanya that Barcheinu Avinu, what makes us the greatest vehicle for blessings? Kulanu ke'echad, when we're all as one, when we have unity. Okay, today we're going to speak, and I hope we'll cover most of what I want to talk about. Sometimes, when you're so involved in something, it's hard to limit. And the truth is, I want to talk about some subjects today that are all comprehensive and encompassing to Yiddishkeit. Family, Shabbos, and leadership. So I hope I'll be able to cover all the subjects. Maybe each one will not be given due allotted amount of time. But, you know, similar to the famous story with the Tzemach Tzedek said, when he speaks, how could he speak? When he used to give sermons and Farbrengen and say Torah, how is it that he has something to say that everyone could relate to? And the Tzemach Tzedek said that he's like a kaplushmacher. He's like a hat store. Someone walks into the store and they find a hat which is measured to their size. So he speaks so much, there's so much content in what he's saying, that there's something for everyone. So today, even though usually I like to focus on one thing, today we're going to speak about a couple of things connected to the Parsha, and hopefully everyone will have something to take from it that's relevant to their lives. So, this week's Parsha is Parshas Vayakhel, and the pasuk says, Vayakhel Moshe assembled as kol adas bnei Yisrael, the entire congregation. Vayemer aleim eila dvarim asher tziva Hashem lasis oisam. These are the things that the Eibush has commanded you to do. And then he says, Sheishis yomim teosem melacha, work may be done for 6 days. Uvayem ashvi yilchem kedesh Shabbos Shabbos of Hashem, etc. But on the 7th day it shall be holy for you, a day of complete cessation of work, designated for Hashem. So over here is the very many famous questions that all the commentaries ask, and that is, number one, man ishtana. What's this time that the pasuk speaks that Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas bnei Yisrael, that before he spoke to them it says that he assembled them all together? How come it doesn't say like everywhere else in the Torah, Vayemer Moshe el kol bnei Yisrael? Moshe spoke to all the Yidden. What's up over here? Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas bnei Yisrael. What's this time that he addressed the nation different than every other time throughout the entire Torah? Also, what are these other things? He says, Eila dvarim asher tziva Hashem. Then he mentions Shabbos, and then he mentions the construction of the Mishkan. But seemingly both of those things were already mentioned before. In the Aseret HaDibros and Parshas Yisro we had about Shabbos, and in Turim and Tetzaveh we had all about the Mishkan already. So what's the novelty over here? What's the difference? So first I'm going to speak on one subject, and that is the Sikha of the Rebbe in Likutei Sichos Chelik Aleph, Vayakhel, which is based on a mimer of the Rebbe, Vayakhel Tovshin Yud Beis, it's a Chassidic discourse that he said in 1952. You have to see that for more details. I'm just going to say what he says there, Bekitzer, but the main word applies to everything I'm going to say afterwards. And that is that over here, there's a major headlines. What's that Vayakhel Moshe with the words that Rashi says, L'mochas Yom HaKippurim. This was the day after Yom Kippur. So in other words, this was the major headlines, a major event. And what was that? The first time Moshe Rabbeinu was going to address the Yidden after Chet HaEgel. So we had the worst sin that was ever committed by the nation, the sin of the golden calf. And now, Moshe gave them the Shlucha Shniyas on Yom Kippurim. On Yom Kippur, Hashem forgave the Yidden, Salachti Kidvarecha. Now, the day after Yom Kippur, Moshe was now going to deliver a talk which was going to be, so to speak, an antidote, how such a thing could never happen again. What would be the antidote that the sin of Chet Egel should never happen again? Where was the mistake? Where did they go wrong? And how can you live your life in such a way that this mistake shall never happen again? So in that discourse and in the Sikha, the Rebbe explains Avodah Zarah means, idolatry means that we give credence to something else which is outside of Hashem. That's one of the main points of Chassidus, that the idea of Achdus Hashem, the idea of one Hashem, means that there's only one reality. There's only one power, not only just one God. And therefore, what does idolatry mean? When you begin to believe that it's your toil and your involvement in work that's giving you sustenance, that's idolatry. Which is also connected to the idea that the golden calf was made out of gold, Egel Azov. And if you see the Balaturim in the beginning of Kisisa and also many other places, it speaks about one of the ideas of the Avodah Zarah of the golden calf was the idea of money, 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 bowing down to the mighty dollar. So, how do we prevent that? We prevent that by understanding, and this is what the pasuk means of it, this is the way the Maimon explains, Sheishes Yomim Te'asa Melacha. Work may be done. Te'asa doesn't mean you should do work, but work may be done. It's in such a language means Te'asa B'derech Lamela. If your involvement of work is in such a way that it's not you sold your soul for $1, but you realize that it's only a means to an end, and it's only that it's really the bracha of Hashem, and you have to do something. So that's how you're living your whole week. Your whole week is not about the materialism. And it's not about that you're obsessed with financial gain. Your life revolves around spirituality. Your life revolves around Hashem. Therefore you get up in the morning, you daven a minyan, and you learn Dafayemi or Chassidus, and you go to the mikveh, whatever you do. First you focus, you connect spiritually. And then you go out into the world, and then your whole day is different, because you have the right foundation, and you understand what it's really about. And that's what it means, Sheishes Yomim Te'oseh. In other words, what was one of the questions over here that we knew already before about Shabbos, and we knew already before about the Melechas HaMishkan? Over here, the pasuk is going to tell us a new thing called Shabbos Shabbosin. If you want to really have a Shabbos, then your whole week has to be lived differently. If you make spirituality primary during the whole week, then your Shabbos is a Shabbos. But if your whole week, your focus is primarily on the material, then the Shabbos won't be a Shabbos. That's what the pasuk is telling us over here. And that's why Vayakhel, this was a way, a lesson of how to live our lives in such a way that we should never come to idolatry. And the answer is, as long as we focus on the true values and the true virtues of what it is, his spirituality. That's what it says in the Maimer. So that's one point. Now I want to speak to another point, very interestingly, and I'm speaking about things, I'm speaking to my students. I'm not a preacher. Lay preacher anoichi, v'lay ben preacher anoichi. I'm not a preacher, I'm not a son of a preacher, but there's some things that I see around I feel that these things have to be corrected, and I hope that we could see improvement in all these areas, beginning from ourselves. And that is, for example, speeches, sermons, on Shabbos, Advar Torah. Recently, someone asked me to speak by a simcha of their child. So the Baal Simcha asked me to speak. Before I spoke, 3 people came over to me and said, make sure not to speak more than 10 minutes. You can understand how I felt, my ego, Rahman al-Islam, but that's not the main point. The main thing is, let's depersonalize. Let's talk about the idea over here. And that is, one of the answers to this question of why over here it says, Vayakhel Moshe, and then he speaks about Shabbos, And the Baal HaTurim brings it down, and that's the famous halacha that's brought down in Shulchan Aruch Siman Reish Tzadik, that from here we learn out that when it comes to Shabbos, the rabbis have to gather the Yidden, Vayakhel, Moshe, and then it speaks about Shabbos because on Shabbos has to be Makel Kehilis. I'm going to read you the Lashon Alter Rebbe in Siman Reish Tzadik, Sivkot and Gimel, and this is actually a question. V'dorshe Chachamim, this question is asked explicitly. Lama nema v'Parshas Vayakhel, shalei nema came b'chol ha'Torah kula. Why over here does it say Vayakhel? Omer HaKodesh Baruch Hu l'Moshe, Hashem told Moshe, Reid v'aseli kehilos g'delis b'Shabbos. Make me great gatherings and assemblies in Shabbos. K'dei sheyilmudu hadoros haboyim acharecho, that the generations that will come after you will learn lahakel kehilos b'chol Shabbos, to gather their congregations every single Shabbos, leikonis b'bate knesiyos b'bate midrashes, lumad b'em Torah l'rabim. So here we see, and this goes together, we can look at it, that one of the antidotes to Chet HaEgel is a strong community. And a strong community united around a common cause. So I'm going to put it in 2 points. What is the antidote to Chet HaEgel? Number 1, selflessness, in contrast to ego, as we'll discuss it. So just like we said before in the Rebbe's Maimer, the person thinks he thinks it's his brains, it's his street smarts, it's his innovations that's making him the parnosa. That's Avodah Zarah. So therefore the focus has to be that he has to know Teosa Malacha. It's not about you, it's about the bracha that Hashem gives you. So it's not your ego, selflessness will bring you closer to Hashem. Bittul ein HaKodesh Baruch Hu Sheireh El Masha Bottle, let's lay his Baruch. Through your selflessness you get closer to Hashem. Now comes the same thing over here. By the rabbis giving shiurim and Torah on Shabbos, about halacha especially, Rotzein Hashem. If the person lives his life and he thinks, what does Hashem want? And that's the first thought always in every situation. What does Hashem want? Then he won't come to do any Avodah Zarah. The problem with Chet HaEgel was they decided to do this. They didn't ask their spiritual leaders, the mashpim or the rabbonim. They decided. And when you decide, that's when you make a mistake. But if you're thinking solely what is the Ratzon Hashem, it will be impossible to make a Chet HaEgel. And the Tur actually in Siman Reish Tzadik, in some editions, brings a lashon from Medrash Tanchuma, made the lashon. Omra Teira Lefnei HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Teira said before Hashem, Rebbeinu Shalom, Kishayichnasu Yisrael la'aretz, when the Yidden will go into Eretz Yisrael, Zeratz l'karmei, this person will run to his vineyard, V'zeratz l'sadeu, this person will run to his field, V'ani matehei olai. The Torah said before Hashem, what's going to be with me? Mela, when they were in the Midbar, they were all unemployed, they're not in the city, so everyone has time to sit and learn in Kollel all day. But once they go into a city, back to civilization. Once they go to a city and there's work, and there's the 6 days of the week, etc. So what's going to be with Torah? Omallah, the Eibusha said to Torah, listen to this. Yesh li zug shani mizavig l'cha. I'm going to give you a partner. Like you'll be a couple, you'll be married. Who's going to be your partner? V'Shabbos Shmei. The name of your partner is Shabbos. Shem b'telim melachtam v'yechelim lasek b'cha. Since Shabbos is a day where we don't have to work, so therefore Shabbos will be a day which is dedicated to Torah. So this is another sign. Every person looks at themselves and they feel they're good. They try to do what the Eibishter wants. But what's the Evan HaBeichen? What's the test to see clearly if you have the right mindset and the right attitude and the right perspective or not? And the answer is, what does your Shabbos look like? Now that you're not working, are you dedicating yourself to Torah? And this is the match. Shabbos and Torah. Why? because they both focus on spirituality. Shabbos is Aliyas HaElemis. We transcend the worlds, and Shabbos Miloshen Tosha, we go back to the source. We're in spirituality. We're focused on spirituality. There's no emails, there's no dumb phones, there's no smartphones. There's nothing. There's spirituality. And that's the same idea of Torah. Torah is the same idea. Oisem nafshem ikev v'gufim Torah. Torah is our guide, and it always shows us how we have to focus on the right values. Hashem, Hashem, etc. So that's the second thing. As an antidote to the Chet HaEgel is a sense of community. Vayakhel, and go to shul, daven with the minyan, participate in the shiurim. Because in the end, Chet HaEgel is selfishness, and it's also divisiveness. And I forgot to mention this before. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Samach Gimel, Amid Beis, which just shows that how Avodah Zarah is plain and simple selfishness to give in to your desires. The Gemara says, Omer Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Rabbi Yehuda said, Yoidin ha Yisrael ba'avodas kechoven. The Yidden knew that Avodah Zarah, she'ein ba mamish, that has no substance. There's nothing real to it. Why are you going for this piece of wood? For this piece of bronze? Whatever it is. The Jewish people knew that idol worship is of no substance. They didn't really believe in it. But why did they serve Avodah Zarah? Only to permit themselves to engage in acts of immoral relations in public. Because many of the Avodah Zarahs had these immodest activities in public. So in other words, they simply had a strong desire to follow the lusts that was in their heart, and by joining this party, they're able to do what they want. So again, Avodah Zarah brings out your selfishness, your ego, and your desires, and being connected to the Eibishter means that you're transcending your desires, you're transcending your ego, and you're getting involved in something which is greater than yourself. And that's what Shabbos is. You know, I said this before, sometimes when you think about that the Eibishter gave us Shabbos, and he gave it to us even before Matan Torah. And that's why when it comes to Shabbos, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadosh HaShabbos. But when it comes to Yom Tov, we say, Mekadosh Yisrael V'Azmanim. That the Yidden are the ones who, according to Riyam Bezdin, are the ones who decide when the Rosh Chodesh is. But Shabbos is Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadosh HaShabbos. The Eibishter set up Shabbos from the 6 days of creation. And then you think about it, that today the world is so obsessed with devices, and everyone is thinking of different ways how to deal with this problem, and how it's destroying the generation, etc., etc. And then when you think that the Eibishter preempted it, Higdim Refuah L'Maka, he gave us Shabbos, Shabbos, Kodesh, 5,784 years ago. Unbelievable. And we see today clearly that those that kocht sich in Shabbos, it gives them a spirituality, a recharge, a rejuvenation for the entire week. And it's an idea of strengthening a strong community, a strong family unit. And these are the things that helps us stay on the right path. And Vayakhel Moshe, this is what the major message is over here. So far we spoke about Shabbos, Shiurim in Shabbos, connecting Beruchnis in Shabbos, etc. And also to realize that all your work the whole week is of secondary importance, that even while you're doing the work, you realize that it's really a spiritual activity to direct it towards Hashem. Kol Masha Bara HaKodesh Baruch Hu Bara L'Chveidah. Now we come to another interesting point, which some of Farshim bring out, and I think it's very important. One of the reasons why over here, Moshe Rabbeinu was telling us about Shabbos connecting with the Mishkan, is the idea of a mitzvah above Aveira. People could have thought they're so inspired and galvanized to build a Beis HaMikdash, to build a Mishkan. It's Avodas HaKodesh. It's Melechas HaKodesh. So you'd think that the Melechas HaKodesh will push away Shabbos. We say no. It doesn't push away Shabbos. Why not? Whatever. That's the Eibishter who decides when you do this and when you do that. This is Shulchan Aruch. Find out what the Ratzon Hashem is in every single situation. And if you don't find out what Ratzon Hashem is in every situation, you will make a mistake. And that's the message that Moshe is giving over again, an antidote to the Chet HaEgel. People that made the Chet HaEgel, they came up with all sorts of rationalizations and rationalizations and reasonings why they should do it. Self-justifications. But there was one thing. The Eibishter did not command them to do it. And Moshe Rabbeinu did not command them to do it. In other words, it was Heipach Ratzon Hashem. You decided. Who are you to decide? It's a cheshbon. As it says in Hayom Yom, the famous Hayom Yom of Chav Gimel Sivan, a story with the Rebbe Rashab, where he says, Ad oz lo yadaiti sheyuchal liyos frumen nefesh b'ames veret nachach chsidish nefesh b'ames. Sometimes the person can have the greatest rationalizations that sound so holy, but really it's coming from the other side, from your Yetzer Hara. And that's the message over here. Moshe Rabbeinu is coming down, Vayakhel Moshe, and he's telling the message. You might have motives that seem holy, but remember one thing, Ratzon Hashem. And that's the message also of Vayakhel. The only thing that could unite the people is when it's really the Ratzon Hashem. And now I'm coming to the subject that I really want to talk about. I realize it's so late. But this is really what I wanted to talk about. Vayakhel Moshe. We need leaders. To have a strong community, you have to have a leader. And we have to decide that this is someone who's going to be a leader, a rabbi, and then follow the rabbi. And then you'll have a community which will be united and will serve the Eibishter. There's a Sikh in the Rebbe of Micheli Beis, where the Rebbe gets into the whole lashon of Yayosu Kulam Aguda Echos Lasois Ritzoncha Belevav Shalom. And the Rebbe explains over there how in Likutei Sichos, page Cheli Beis, page 436 and 437, see there how the only way that we can have true unity is Yayosu Kulam Aguda Echos. When will we have a unity? Only when it's Lasois Ritzoncha Belevav Shalom, when it revolves around the will of Hashem. And we see this so true today. All the isms, you name it, whatever the ism is, they've all failed. And today, I don't want to get into it, we have the polarization of entire countries, whether it's the United States of America, whether in Eretz Yisrael before October 7th, whether in Britain, whether in Canada, whether in Australia. And I believe there's a major problem. There's a major problem connected to leadership. But it's a major problem. But I don't know what the solution is in the Goyische Welt. But in the Frumme Welt, in unserer Welt, the Yiddische Welt, if we kocht sich in Veyosu Kula Megude Echos, Lasser Zeicho Belev Shalom, the more we kocht sich in Ratzon Elyon, the more we kocht sich in Shulchan Aruch, then the more shaykh to have Lasser Zeicho Agude Echos. That's the only unity that is true when it's based on true foundations. Like, for example, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya Perek Lamed Beis, when he speaks about Avos Yisrael, and he says, "B'shagam shekulam masimois v'Vayakhel v'kulona," because all Yidden are actually equal. We all have a soul, a neshama, a nefesh alikis, and we all have one Father. U'lechein nikru kol Yisrael achem mamish mitzad sheresh nafsham b'Hashem echad. And therefore, we're all called mamish brothers because of our souls. And this is what the Alter Rebbe brings out. And this is also connected with Vayakhel Moshe. We have to remember, and I want to connect this. Yesterday was Chav Zayin Oder. It's 32 years since the Rebbe had a stroke. And then the events of Gimel Tammuz followed. And there is a certain lack that we can't see a holy tzaddik with our physical eyes and hear these makal kehillis. The Rebbe was the one who was Mekayim this. He gathered us every single Shabbos, and we heard Fabrengens, and we heard Torah, and the Rebbe spoke about this halacha and Shulchan Aruch. So we have to realize, Vayakhel, who's the one who could achieve Vayakhel, to bring together the whole community? Moshe. So Moshe is the ultimate of Vayakhel. The Rebbe explains also in the Sikh and Chelik Vav, that Vayakhel means a new entity. It's not only just a gathering of individuals. He's able to make him truly a new entity, like we speak about Tzibur. A Tzibur is a new entity. the only one who could actually take an entire congregation of individuals and make it one new unit is Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe is the essence of the entire nation, a true leader, a true tzaddik. But now let's take it down a notch. In general, if we talk about Melbourne, we had a shliach here, Rabbi Groner, Olav Shalom. He was an unbelievable leader. He was like the glue of the community. He knew everybody. He knew everyone's parents. He knew everyone's grandparents. And he was worried about everyone. He cared about everyone. And he brought the whole community together. And this is something that, we have to first have a concept of what it means. Vayakhel Moshe. There needs to be a leader. The Rebbe spoke this also when it came to Shnas Hakel. And the idea of a melech, there's a king who brings together the whole nation. And the Rebbe interpreted on a personal level to every person that the father is like the melech. He's the leader of his family. And he has to be a role model to his children. And just like we see in life, as long as the children love the parents, that itself is a unifying factor that brings together the whole family. Sometimes when the parents pass away, then all sorts of machlokes happen. But as long as they live with the spirit of the parents, it was a unifying factor. And the same thing is true when we talk about leadership qualities. We have to talk and understand that a leader has to be a unifier, which means he has to bring the people, bring out the best in every single people, because he cares about everybody. Because he himself is selfless. Moshe Rabbeinu is the level of total bittul, v'nachnu mo. He's completely selfless. He brings out the selflessness in every single one, everyone else, in all of Bnei Yisrael, and he raises them to a higher consciousness, to be focused on Hashem, to be focused on spirituality, a common mission, a greater good. And that's because he cares about everyone, and he shows how everyone could retain their individuality, even as they become part of the whole. And we see this again and again by the Rebbe. He wants you to be a lawyer, he wants you to be a doctor, he wants you to be a Rosh Hashiva, but we're all shluchim. And in the first Fabrengen, when he said, we are the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Geula, he was saying we're making a revolution now. I'm using that word. And it galvanized the entire Doir, that we're focused now to bring Mashiach. He was a unifier, and he unified everybody. Vayakhel, her Rabbi, the whole generation, for the goal and to the mission to bring Mashiach. להמשיך את השכינה דול למטה בארץ, to elevate the entire world, to pick up the entire world, to transform the entire world, and to make it a dwelling place for Hashem, a better place, and thereby bringing the Geula Mitzvah Shlema. So the same thing is true in general. If we're looking for a leader, if you are a leader of a company, if you are a leader, everyone's a leader, so to speak, of his family, of a classroom, of an institution. We have to remember that one of the main important principles of leadership is to be Vayakhel, a unifier. And to be a unifier, first of all, you have to be a role model of selflessness. And one certain expression, I like it very much. Officers eat last. Officers eat last. Where I understand is that, in the army they have, let's say, the dining room. So the officer lets all the soldiers take food first, and he eats last. And you would think to yourself, be the opposite. He can go to the head of the line and take first. No, officers eat last. That's the true role model. He shows his troops, he shows the soldiers that are under his command that he cares about them more than he cares about himself. First you guys eat. Officers eat last. So he's a role model of selflessness, dedication, devotion, compassion, care, and concern. And then he could bring them higher to reach levels of transcendence, selflessness, to dedicate themselves, and that they should be dedicated and devoted to a higher cause, a greater good. And like we see by the Rebbe, how the Rebbe accomplishes this with the entire generation of Shluchim and all of the Chassidim, and he kept on repeating, everyone's a Shliach, everyone is charged and galvanized to do what they can to bring Mashiach. So the Eibusha should help. We should remember all these points of Vayakhel Moshe, what the message was and why this was a major, major event, and why over here it says Vayakhel. Because after the disaster of Chet Egel has to come the message now how to repair it. We were forgiven, and from here on in we should never make such a mistake. So we spoke about the idea of, number one, the attitude towards work a whole week. We spoke about what the Shabbos has to be like. We spoke about the idea of community. We spoke about the idea of holy motives, so-called, but are really wrong. And we spoke about leadership. The Eibusha should help. If we keep in mind all these messages, we'll do the right thing. And the Eibusha should see how we try to do what's right. And this will be the Yesarus L'Tata, to cause the Yesarus L'Eila, Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, take it from Yad Mamish. Posting from my home, your man in Melbourne.